Oh my goodness, I did it again. I've got to stop doing that. Okay, what is it? 307. There we go. At least I'm able to find it quickly. Okay, here we go. Principle of restoration, principle of restoration. So, we studied how God intended the world to be. We studied how that original purpose of creation was destroyed by the fall. And we've studied, in the last days, we've studied the mission of the Messiah, coming of the Messiah and the mission. And we studied resurrection, we studied predestination, and we've studied Christology. But now it's time to study how, then, God has been working in history to reestablish the original ideal that he had prior to Genesis chapter 3, verse 7. And so first we're going to go through some of the principles. And now the principles are not different from what was in the principle of creation. It's the same principle, but the application is different. And so the principle can be flexible in its application. And so we will see how that works. So in the introduction there, we see that human history is the history of God's providence of restoration. God has been intimately involved in human history. He's not just sort of sitting out there saying, "Yeah, well, you guys got what you deserved," kind of a thing. He's right after Adam and Eve fell, he immediately started to reach out to Adam and Eve, as I said. Right in the right in Genesis 3, we see that God goes walking in the garden and calling out to Adam, right? So why does he do that? Does he not know where Adam is? Does he not know? Of course he does, because he was there when the fall was occurring, and he saw it coming, and he continued to educate, but still Adam and Eve insisted on going down this path. And here, so after 3:7, and they heard the voice of the Lord. This is in 8 now, in the very next verse. Walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord called unto Adam and said unto him, "Where art thou?" So why is God calling to Adam? It is because he wants to give Adam an opportunity to respond. And when God calls and Adam responds, this creates a give and receive relationship. So Adam then is no longer completely cut off. At least he has the very, very rudimentary relationship, but still it's better than nothing at all. And Adam said, "I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." And so there's a conversation there. So that conversation then begins a give and receive relationship. And this is the beginning then of the history of restoration. In the very next verse after the fall. Because the providence of restoration is the providence of recreation that God pursues in order to recover the purpose of his creation, God conducts this providence according to his principle. That's right. It's not a new principle. It's the same principle. Thus, the principle for this providence is called the principle of restoration. And this principle of restoration explains the providence of God through which fallen human beings are restored to their original created state. Accordingly, unless fallen human beings know the content of the principle of restoration, they will ultimately be unable to find the path of life. This is why God, the Father, in the first section on why we study the OSDP, listed 6 things that are required for a world of peace, and this is one of them, to understand the principle of restoration through indemnity. This is the reason we must clearly know and understand the principle of restoration. And so this is what has happened, that the providence of restoration, you see here, God, these 2 arrows represent, you're not seeing my thingy, are you? Okay, my laser pointer. Okay, here we have 2 arrows representing Adam and Eve. They came as far as the top of the growth stage. Before God could bless them in marriage, they fell to a level that was below where they started, because now they are unprincipled beings. They're not even at the level where they started, because they started as principal beings without original sin. But now they have original sin, and they are contradictions. They are under Satan's dominion, but also God can also have a relationship with them. So they're both. So that means that they're the womb of good and evil. But anyway, fallen human beings now have to receive the Messiah, have to be reborn through the Messiah, who is the second Adam. And then, when reborn when they're reborn, then the original sin then is cut off, meaning that their relationship with Satan is severed, and the relationship with God is reestablished. And then finally going through this final stage to become completed human beings. And this is the path of restoration through indemnity, and this is the path that has been walked once already, because Adam and Eve already went this far. But then the path of the principle, the path of Shimjong, is a path that is yet to be walked. Adam and Eve never got this far. So when the Messiah comes, he and his bride must walk this path in order to open the way for all of humanity. Father, remember, said, "I know I've paved a highway for you, from the bottom of hell to all the way to heaven. I've paved that road for you. I've given you a car. I've given you gasoline. All you guys got to do is just drive the thing there." So he paves the road, right? He paves the road to heaven and to the road that all humanity must walk. So, but in its fallen state, God and Satan can both have relationship with human beings. As we saw, God called out to Adam even right after the fall. So it was possible for God to have a relationship, but also Satan has already established himself as the God of this world, the Lord of this world. So then here, we're one body with Satan, and we have Satan's evil nature, and we are Satan's dwelling. We're a child of Satan, Satan's thoughts and actions, and we have fallen nature and original sin. So this is what it means to say that we are the womb or the origin of good and evil. Satan has influence on us, and God also can have influence on us as far as there's goodness within us. Good and evil do not act or function to the same degree within human beings. In the case of fallen human beings, the basis of evil is completed, decisive element, and for this reason it is easily triggered into action and easily expressed. Isn't that true? The evil part of us is very easily triggered, isn't it? Whereas the goodness within us, it takes work. Yeah. On the other hand, in fallen human beings, the basis of good is as yet imperfect, and without a conscious effort to encourage and develop it, it cannot easily bear fruit. Yeah. It's much easier to do bad things many times than it is to do good things. Maybe not for you, but for me. Right? The restoration of fallen human beings then has to take place. Firstly, human beings have to have their fallen nature removed through a course of separation from Satan. So that's the first thing, to separate human beings from Satan. And then next, to restore the form or image of having been restored up to the top of the completion level of the growth stage. These three stages are also divided into three levels, and each level is also formation, growth, and completion. So you have formation, growth, and completion in the formation stage, formation, growth, and completion in the growth stage, and formation, growth, and completion in the completion stage. So here, we fell, Adam and Eve fell at the top of the growth stage or at the completion level of the growth stage. So to go to that point then, go back to that point. On this foundation, human beings must meet the Messiah and be reborn through him. That is, have their original sin removed by him, thus restoring the position of human beings prior to the fall. Finally, by following and attending the Messiah, the true parent, human beings must complete their growth, in other words, going through now the completion stage, to achieve completion of Shimjong and become a completed substantial self. And so these first two stages, including the unprincipled realm here, are the course for the separation from Satan. Once we can get past this top of the growth stage, then we're able to say, okay, we're separated from Satan. Not that we don't make mistakes, but we can say that we can now we're in that completion stage and we're separated from Satan. Complete salvation is achieved and accomplished through the agency of the true parent. a true pattern. At what point does Messiah come? At the completion level of the growth stage. So at the top of the growth stage, this is when the Messiah is able to meet us. The reason Adam and Eve fell at the completion level of the growth stage at the growing period. And this is why God, when he, after the fall, he goes walking in the garden and he calls out to Adam. But at that point there, Adam does not have the foundation to receive the Messiah. Because Adam is way down here right now. And to receive the Messiah, human beings have to be at the top of the growth stage. And so there's going to be a process for going from the unprincipled realm where Adam is now to the top of the growth stage in order to receive the Messiah. So there has to be some foundation there before the Messiah can be received. If the Messiah is just going to be sent to be killed, then, it's easy. You can send the Messiah anytime. I'm sure, I came from God. Oh, yeah, just, kill him anytime. Any barbarian would do that, be happy to do that. But it's more complicated than that. Right? It can't just be killed and then resurrect and then everything will be all right. There has to be a foundation to receive the Messiah so that people will believe the Messiah and then through the Messiah reestablish a connection with God and then be reborn through the Messiah. So the process is actually quite difficult and quite involved, and so that is why Jesus could not come until there was a foundation on which he could arrive. There had to be a chosen people. Couldn't just be just send. Jesus just couldn't come to any old Germanic tribe that some of us are descended from. Has to be a chosen people who are receiving a special advanced education from God as the chosen people. Why? So that they can receive the Messiah and believe in him and unite with him so that they can be God's instruments for bringing salvation to the entire world. So why must fallen human beings receive the blessing? In order to have their original sin removed and resolved. Why do fallen beings receive the blessing at the completion of the level of the growth stage? And why do the completion level of the growth stage? Well, that's so that their original sin can be resolved at that point. And this is what the holy blessing is. That's the importance of the holy blessing. The holy blessing is not just a marriage ceremony. For the first generation, it is a salvation ceremony. And for subsequent generations, it is a ceremony where the goodness of God, the foundation of God, is being expanded more and more in this world. So the multidimensional history of the conflict between good and evil. So Satan has been acting on fallen human beings. God has also been having a give and receive relationship there. But there have been, on Satan's side, individuals and families and nations and worlds centering on Satan. And also God has been working to establish his individuals and families and nations and world centering on God. And this war conflict has involved property and land, people and ideologies. So it's been a very tough and difficult history to get to where we are today. The dominant factor in the development of history, again, 100% completion of God's will is up to 95% God's responsibility and 5% human responsibility. Important thing is, again, that God cannot do this alone. God cannot do this alone. It requires human responsibility, requires human input, human action. And that is what has been the issue all along. God is always doing his part, and Jesus did his part, but Jesus could not do it alone. Jesus could not force the people of Israel to accept him. He could not say, the Bible or the Bible or the sword. That's not the way it works in Jesus' ideology. In other religions, maybe, but not in Jesus' teaching. It has to be a voluntary choice for people to accept Jesus into their lives and to dedicate their lives to Jesus. And people at that time, well, very few at least were able to do that. Maybe one or two or more. The disciples, I sometimes wonder even about the disciples, but maybe But anyway, there wasn't enough of a victory there for Jesus to be able to live long enough to have a wife, to have children, and to plant God's lineage on the earth. So the providence of restoration through indemnity, fallen human beings are in the midway position. So we have both an evil mind and an original mind, because God created us. So there is some part of God still in us. Even the most evil person will have some part, because even the most evil person is still a child of God, a creation of God. So God still has that original mind planted in there. But Satan has really taken over and put his claws in people, and there's this very strong evil mind. So human beings are in the midway position. We go back and forth. Sometimes we're on Satan's side, sometimes we're on God's side. And so then sometimes we set evil conditions, and sometimes we set good conditions, as we talked about in the chapter on resurrection. The definition of indemnity. So here we now. This is an important concept here of indemnity. When a person loses his or her original position or state of being, indemnity refers to the establishment of conditions that a person must make in order to be restored back to that lost original position. So it's conditions. Indemnity is basically conditions that we set to be restored back to our original lost position. Right? So we're trying to get back to there. We're trying to get back to the garden. So restoration through indemnity is the process whereby fallen human beings return to their original position by establishing conditions. That's the restoration through indemnity. Indemnity condition is a condition that is established in order to restore a person or thing through indemnity. And the providence of restoration through indemnity is God's providence to restore human beings to the state where they were in when originally created, by having them establish indemnity conditions. So, sometimes when we're witnessing to a person and the person is not very receptive, still we can help that person establish conditions, sometimes without their full knowledge of it. They may accept, for example, just accepting a book or a pamphlet. That may be a small condition, but it is. So these are conditions that people do that that they do in order to go one way or the other, towards Satan or toward God, towards Satan or toward God. I think if we look back on our especially those of us in the first generation, if we look back on our life before the church, we can see some of the conditions that we set unknowingly sometimes, but these sort of led to a point where God could call us in this way. So conditions. So indemnity is about setting conditions that a person must make in order to be restored back to that lost original position. So, and there are three types of indemnity conditions. There's indemnity conditions of equal value. For example, Exodus 21, 23, and 25 talks about a life for a life, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. So these are equal. So you take my life, I take your life. Or you take my, pardon? Money? well, that's my money anyway. Okay. So this is equal, okay? Those are equal conditions, equal value. And then indemnity conditions of lesser value, for example, faith, compared to the crime that was committed, compared to the fall that was committed, which took everything away from God. By the fall of Adam and Eve, God lost everything. He lost his cosmos. He lost everything. Everything was taken by Satan because Adam and Eve were at the pinnacle of God's creation. So by taking the pinnacle, Satan took everything. So considering that we are in that position, then it's a pretty good deal that all we have to do is believe in Jesus. It's a pretty good deal. It's an incredibly good deal, actually. And this is an example of an indemnity condition of lesser value. Baptism is another indemnity condition of lesser value. Yeah. We're not actually dying, we're just getting dunked, or in the case of many mainline denominations, just having some water sprinkled on your head. Holy Communion is another one, taking the wine and the bread. Or a humble apology is another one, where you've really wronged a person, and if that person accepts your apology, then you're getting off pretty easy. But there are also conditions of greater value. For example, the sacrifice of Isaac, we'll see, where Abraham was told by God to make an offering, and he failed to make that offering, just kind of a small, relatively small mistake. But as a result of that, then he had to actually be willing to kill his son Isaac with his own hand. Now, he didn't actually kill him, but got pretty close, yes. And also the Israelites on the way out of Egypt to Canaan were not really, shall we say, united with Moses. And eventually God said, okay, you guys can stay in the wilderness for another 40 years. And they had to, and actually until all of the first generation died off, with the exception of two of them. So then those were indemnity conditions of a greater value, and there are reasons why those come into play. So different kinds of indemnity conditions. And the method by which indemnity conditions are established, there's a course here. The reverse course of the fall. Because Adam betrayed God, and then God abandoned Jesus. Like in Matthew 27:46, when Jesus was on the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. So Jesus felt that God had abandoned him on the cross. And so he cried out to God, "Why have you abandoned me?" This is in Matthew 27, very dramatic scene while Jesus is on the cross. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Okay. So this is the reverse course, because Adam betrayed God, and so God, to establish a condition that Adam's betrayal was basically resolved or paid for, also at that moment, for momentarily, had to abandon Jesus, and that was what was happening there. Israel hated Jesus, and then Israel now, or the new Israel, hated Jesus, put him on the cross. Israel now must love Jesus and take up the cross. Adam betrayed the will, caused God grief, so now humankind must love the will and comfort God. So these are things that the examples of where we are taking the opposite course in establishing indemnity conditions. Adam forsook God and fell. Humankind fell into Satan's bosom. So now, in order to recover humankind from the bosom of Satan and return them to God, Jesus had to worship and honor God despite being abandoned by God on the cross. So do not resent or blame God. Do not resent or blame anyone. Who establishes indemnity conditions? Fallen human beings themselves are the ones who must establish indemnity conditions. So this scale just illustrates the principle of the three types of indemnity conditions. It can be, if 50 is the crime, then it can either be 20 or it can be 50. Equal indemnity would be 50. Lesser indemnity would be 20. Greater indemnity would be 70. So these scales, we live in a just universe, and the scales have to be balanced. At some time or another, we're going to be accountable for everything that we have done. But being accountable does not necessarily mean that we have to pay the equal indemnity. Especially now, we receive a lesser indemnity, and the holy blessing is a pretty good deal in that sense. We just stand there, and it takes just about a half an hour, and then a 40-day separation, 3-day ceremony. All these things are relatively easy compared to the grief that was caused to God by the fall. So what indemnity conditions should fallen people make? We need to know what conditions Adam and Eve originally should have made. Why? Because indemnity conditions are established through the reverse course. So what should they have done? And what did they do? So then what is it that we must do? All right, so here we go. So human beings, okay, give and receive relationship with God, okay, and then having dominion over the angels and all creation, give and receive relationship there. But then this is what was supposed to happen. And then the angels then would love human beings from God's perspective. And also then angels would acknowledge and have human beings mediate between them and God. So here, God is the Father, and human beings are the children. So and the angels are the servants of the children. So the angels would relate to God through Adam and Eve, and receive also God's love through Adam and Eve. So to establish Adam and Eve as mediators. And the angels were to obey Adam and Eve, and to multiply goodness through Adam and Eve, to multiply and continue to create, to expand the creation, multiply God's goodness in the creation. And so here, establishing this connection between God and human beings, this is a vertical relationship, or we call this the foundation of faith. And here, the horizontal relationship between humans and the angels, this is the horizontal, or we call it the foundation of substance. So the foundation of faith is primary. The first there has to be that foundation of faith, this connection between God and human beings. When that exists, then God's love can be transmitted to the angels and to all creation. So, because human beings are supposed to have dominion over all creation, that includes the angels. And then the angels also then make their offering to human beings, and then human beings then transmit that up to God. So the human beings then must believe and practice God's word, become the incarnation of God's word, and completing the character of as well. So human beings govern over creation and the angels, or angels are part of creation as a person of completed character, and establishing the order within the created world. So these are the conditions that Adam and Eve should have established to create this kind of order within the creation. God, human beings, relating vertically, human beings receiving God's word, believing it and practicing it, becoming incarnation of the word, and completing our character. And then based on that, then as we as a part of the third blessing, then we have a dominion over the angels as well. And then there's this LMOG, which we will see again and again through this principle of restoration. Love, mediate through Adam, obey, and multiply goodness. Love, mediate, obey, and goodness. So we'll see that LMOG come up again and again and again through this section. So the indemnity conditions for the removal of fallen nature now, so that was what was supposed to happen. Fallen nature, though, in the fall, Lucifer failed to love Adam and Eve from God's viewpoint. He was jealous and envious, because until Adam and Eve appeared for thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps actually maybe billions of years, Lucifer was the top guy. He was the top guy. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the creation process, God creates his little children. So how is Lucifer supposed to submit himself to these little children? Well, so that is why God gave the children, Adam and Eve, the word and also the warning not to eat of the fruit. So it wasn't difficult. All they had to do was not do that. And if one of them, if Eve failed and still Adam was a fail-safe, if Adam and Eve fell still Cain and Abel were still fail-safe. So it didn't have to come to this point. But anyway, so there is this jealousy and envy that archangel felt. But that could have been dealt with if Eve had simply said no. All right. We see that, the archangel is not using physical force against her. It doesn't appear anyway in Genesis that he's actually using physical force against her. I don't know what would have happened if she had said no. God said, don't eat it, and I'm not going to eat it. But anyway, that's something that did not happen, so we cannot speculate on that. So now, anyway, what happened, though, was that Lucifer did not love Adam and Eve from God's viewpoint. So to restore that, there has to be the opposite condition, to love someone who is between us and God from God's perspective. And then also, the second thing was fallen nature was to leaving one's position for existence. And so, in other words, to take over a position, to try to be closer to God or try to be higher on the pinnacle of the hierarchy or something like that, in order to leave our position. And we each have a position that we are in, or several positions actually. We're a father, we're a son, we're a mother, we're a daughter, we're an aunt, we're an uncle, and we are also within organizations. We have certain positions. So we need to understand what that position is and what is expected of us as that in that position. And so now, to restore this, we need to keep that position and to establish someone as a mediator between us and God. The reversal of dominion is arrogance. We need to reverse that. We need to keep that dominion and obey. And multiplication of evil was what happened here. So now we have to multiply God's will of goodness. So God originally was to have a relationship with Adam, and then Adam and Eve were to eventually be one. But here, the angel, though, was supposed to serve Adam, but instead of doing that, he broke that relationship with Adam. Instead of raising himself up here, leaving his position here, taking over Eve, and then through Eve, taking over Adam. So these four things that have to happen in order to reverse what happened during the fall. So there has to be a foundation to receive the Messiah. Messiah could not come immediately after the fall, and there were opportunities. Cain and Abel almost had the opportunity. Noah's family almost had the opportunity. And then, Jacob actually established a foundation to receive the Messiah, but by that time, Satan's forces in the world were so great that God had to wait until his chosen people could multiply. So there has to be a foundation to receive the Messiah. And the hope of history is to establish a relationship with the Messiah. Fallen human beings must be restored to the state in which they were originally created. Must be restored to the state in which they were created. Because God is still not giving up on his original ideal, on the original world that he designed, because that is a world of goodness, and it's a fantastic world. It's a fantastic world where human beings are the perfect object partners of God in his love, where we live in the fullness of God's love. And it is a world that we cannot even imagine now how we will live in that world. But it is coming. For this to happen, they must establish a relationship with the Messiah. To establish a relationship with the Messiah, human beings must first establish the foundation for the Messiah. If there is no foundation for the Messiah, fallen people will kill the Messiah when he comes. Which actually happened. The Messiah came and he was killed. But still, even though Jesus was killed, still he was able to establish barely, thanks to the thief on the right, but barely, he was able to establish a foundation on which he could build his church and which he could offer spiritual salvation together with the Holy Spirit to people who believe in him. Okay. So let's look at this foundation to receive the Messiah. Oops. I didn't plug this in. That's not good. Whoa. Boom, there it goes. Sorry about that. Poor preparation on my part.
It's been a long day
this computer, if anyone knows how to replace a battery in this computer, I appreciate it. Does not have an opening. Does not have an opening for the battery. You have to take off the whole thing, and apparently there's some screws that are hidden underneath here. And I took it to Best Buy. We're not certified to do that. And I took it to one of these mom and pop computer stores. Yes, I'll do it, but you have to buy the battery from me. Meanwhile, Best Buy sold me the battery, but wouldn't install it. So now I've got a battery at home. Took it to another store. What did he say? Yeah, I think he said he would do it, but I'm not really sure I trust him. Oh, yeah? Okay. I went to one in Matamoros. See here, do you see that? Oh, you don't see it, do you? It says here, the system has detected the storage capacity of the battery stated below to be very low. For optimal performance, this battery may need to be replaced. Yes, well, I know that because I've been going. It's been a few months since this began. So anyway, I've had this computer now for, I don't know, at least a couple of years, maybe 3 years. And I only bought it for something like $160 at Walmart. Yeah. So maybe they expect me to throw it away. But, for one thing, I don't want to put this into a landfill. Come on. I can add it to the other computers that I have lying around the house. I wasn't even thinking just now. I just turned it off. Instead of hitting escape, I hit the switch. Okay. Are we good? Yes, we're back. Okay. That wasn't bad. That wasn't so hard. Okay. So, all right, we're talking about if there's no foundation for the Messiah, fallen people will kill the Messiah when he comes. And, yes, the people of Israel did turn Jesus over to the Romans to be killed, but it would have been even worse if he had come to my ancestors, for example, probably some Germanic tribe back there, pagan tribe, worshiping pagan gods. So anyway, the foundation of faith and foundation of substance are necessary for the foundation to receive the Messiah. So the foundation of faith, it determines ownership, and because God lost ownership through the fall, He lost ownership over the entire creation, and nothing was left for God. So when, for example, offerings are made to God, when Cain and Abel made their offerings to God, they were restoring ownership to God, or at least Abel was restoring ownership to God through his offering. And taking God's perspective over ownership and human perspective, God's perspective is ownership, human perspective is faith, and offering becomes God's and belonging to God. So the central figure in the foundation of faith is the father of the family. So why wasn't it Adam instead of Abel? We'll talk about that. And the object for the condition, there has to be an object for the condition that's also necessary, a symbolic offering. And in the first stage, this was things out of nature. It was plants, it was animals, this kind of thing. And the word is a symbolic offering. The sacrifices, the ark, for in Noah's instance, it was the ark. In the case of the Israelites in the wilderness, it was the tabernacle, the temple. Later on, that they built the Torah, the gospel. In the New Testament era, Jesus himself offered himself as a sacrifice, and true parents, the principle and teaching. And there has to be a time period, in other words, a growing period of a principal number, 12, 4, 21, and 40, such as. Yeah. Then that's the foundation of faith, and then there has to be a foundation of substance. And whereas the foundation of faith determines ownership, foundation of substance determines governance. So the foundation of faith is that vertical connection. And then the foundation of substance then expands that horizontally, and so that the God can govern over evil, and evil submits to good through this foundation of substance, in a small way and sometimes in a symbolic way, but in one way or another. So the offering becomes God's, and is made by God. So the central figure in the foundation of substance, central figure is the second son. Not the older son, but the second son, not the first son. And the condition is that this is a substantial offering. This is the indemnity condition to remove fallen nature. So we'll see how these kinds of foundations have been laid by central figures through God's history in the Old Testament. And this is what the Old Testament is. It's a history of how God has been laying the foundation, preparing the people of Israel to receive the Messiah. And he goes through a lot of trouble to do this. And a lot of people sacrifice themselves in order to do this. And when you think of Abraham, raising his hand and almost killing his son Isaac, that was a tremendous act of faith. And they did not. Isaac and others did not. Isaac also an act of faith to just lie there and receive that. But Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, the Israelites, and Noah, all these people did not go all the way through that, so that in the end Jesus could be killed. So again, it was not God's purpose for Jesus to be killed. God is not a cynical God. He would not put people all through this process just so that Jesus could be killed when he finally came. Looking at now what's bad here? Okay, maybe this will work now. Okay, the course of the providence of restoration. So, in the providence, originally Adam and Eve were to go through the formation, growth, and completion stages to be completed, but they fell at the top of the growth stage and became fallen human beings. So then, the first 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham was a period of was a certain period. And we'll look at this chart, look at different aspects of this. So we can divide so here, 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, 2,000 approximately. Now these are not exact years, and these are biblical years, especially the first 2,000 and even the second 2,000. But the first 2,000 especially is the sort of the symbolic years. And so in actual reality, from Adam to Abraham must have been tens of thousands or perhaps more than 100,000 years. But this is represented symbolically. This is a symbolic course. So this was a time when we had we can look at the same periods through from different perspectives. Providence according to the Word, providence resurrection, providence through indemnity to indemnify the period of faith, in the scope of the foundation for the Messiah, and the portion of responsibility, and the providential time periods. So the first 2,000 years, from the perspective of the providence according to the Word, was the era of the providence for the foundation for the Word. Because Adam lost the Word. Adam disobeyed. God gave him the Word, but he just threw it away like a piece of trash. He just ignored it. Adam and Eve both did. And so there had to be now a providence to lay the foundation for the Word, to receive the Word again. So here in this first 2,000 years, they don't have the Word of God at all. And from the perspective of the providence for resurrection, this is the era of the providence to lay the foundation for resurrection. There's no resurrection going on here. They're laying the foundation for resurrection. And from the perspective of the providence to restore through indemnity the period of faith, the era of providence to lay the foundation for restoration through indemnity. So this is all about foundation, okay? And the scope of the foundation for the Messiah. Again, the era of providence for the family level foundation for the Messiah. Different families. First, it was Adam's family, and then Noah's family, and then Abraham's family. These different families then were laying the family level foundation for the Messiah during this first 2,000-year, symbolically 2,000-year family. And in terms of the portion of responsibility, laying the foundation for God's portion of responsibility. It's God's portion of responsibility to send the Word, but during this first 2,000 years, there wasn't the foundation to receive that. People had fallen into ignorance, and so they could not receive the Word. And in terms of the providential time parallels, this is the era of symbolic providential time parallels. So this 2,000 years is symbolic. It's not. We're not talking actually, 365 times 2,000 here. So then, anyway, the providence comes as far as Abraham. And first his name was Abram. God calls him out of a satanic country there, a pagan religion. His father was an idol maker. And so God calls him out of there and has him travel all the way to Canaan. And Abraham, he was a man of faith and a father of faith. But then he does make a mistake there and has to restore that in terms of a relationship with Isaac. And then finally, through 3 generations, the foundation of faith and substance can be established. But then from Abraham to Jesus is another approximately 2,000 years. And this is the Old Testament era. This is, in terms of the growing period, this is the formation stage. And that's in the providence according to the Word. And in the perspective of the providence resurrection, it's the era of the providence for the form stage resurrection. Remember, spirits go through 3 stages, and in the first of that lowest stage, they're called form spirits. And in the era for the providence of restoration through indemnity, in terms of the providence for restoration through the period of faith. And in the era of providence for the ethnic group level foundation for the Messiah. So after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then the 12 tribes, then they are now expanding into an ethnic group. They don't yet have sovereignty. They don't yet have a sovereignty around a certain borders, but then they are an ethnic group, and they go to Egypt like that. An era of providence based on God's portion of responsibility, and image-type providential time parallels in terms of the providential parallels. Now Jesus comes, and now this is now the New Testament era in terms of the providence according to the Word. And in the terms of the providence resurrection, it's a providence for the resurrection, for the growth stage resurrection. Now, spirits that lived during the first 4,000 years, biblical 4,000 years, can now, through Jesus, by helping the people who are around Jesus, then they can now go from the formation stage into the growth stage of a resurrection. And in terms of the providence to restore through indemnity the period of faith, it's the era for prolongation of the providence of restoration through indemnity. It's prolongation because it could have all been wrapped up here. If Jesus had been able to take a wife, have children, and establish a lineage on the earth, it would have wrapped up here. And now the providence of salvation would have ended. But no, Jesus had to come again, so there had to be another 2,000 years between Jesus and the return of Christ. So then this is a prolongation period. And the era of providence for the world level foundation for the Messiah. But in that 2,000 years, Christianity spread throughout the world. So now there's a world level foundation to receive the Messiah as an entire world. The world could receive the Messiah. And the era of providence based on Jesus and the Holy Spirit's portion of responsibility, and the era of substantial providential time parallels. Then here, in the completed Testament era, which is what we call the era after the coming of Jesus, then we have the era of providence for completion stage resurrection. People who have died and gone to spirit world in the previous years now have the opportunity now, through the holy blessing, to enter into the completion stage resurrection and become divine spirits. An era for completion of the providence of restoration through indemnity. It's the era of the providence for the cosmic level foundation of the Messiah. Remember that cosmic refers to both the spirit world and physical world. So now the foundation for the Messiah can be established on the cosmic level. So then if someone fails at that level, then that is a cosmic failure, isn't it? And that's the problem. You can go pretty high, but then if you fail, you have to watch out below. Era of the providence based on believers' portion of responsibility. And this is blank because, in terms of providential time parallels, there's no more need for time parallels once the Messiah comes. The purpose of time parallels is to reestablish the foundation for the Messiah, as we'll see later on. So that's why this last square is blank, because now, once Jesus returns, There's no more need for parallels in history. Now, some people like to create all sorts of parallels, and okay, that's fine. I'm sure God is inspiring that. But anyway, the last box is blank, okay? Then the history of the providence of restoration and myself. So what does this all have to do with me? Yeah? So here I am, and I am a descendant of Adam. All of us are descendants of Adam and Eve. And we have a give and receive relationship with God and with God's Shimjong and his fundamental will and a providential mission. So then, also then, I need to establish a relationship with the Messiah, become one and serve and attend the Messiah, and go through a course of restoration through indemnity, not restoration through miracles. So miracles are, nice to see. It's wonderful when people are healed. But that itself is not restoration. Restoration takes place through indemnity. And we can also learn from the successes and failures from the people who went before us. So we are the fruit of history. We all are here because many people went before us and established a foundation for us to exist in the world, for one thing, and to be here. If you have studied your ancestry, I'm sure you know that that many people sacrificed a lot in order for you to have the opportunity to serve the Messiah in this age. And we are the last runner in the heavenly stadium. This is the metaphor that Father uses of the relay race in a stadium. For example, let's say, 400 by 4 relay race, right? Then our forebears are the first 3 people who have run in the relay race, and then we have the baton now, okay? And we have to run, and we have to win the race, okay? And so it's up to us to win the race, to cross that finish line and cut the tape. And we are also creators of new history. Did we lose the internet or something? Did I fiddle with my wire? I'm sorry. Okay. Let me put it up again. Oops, I did it again. I don't believe I keep doing that. But Alt 5, it's so easy. Where am I? 323, okay. What about there? No, there? No, it's too far. Okay, here we are. Here we go. There we go. Okay. I probably messed around with my foot. Yeah, okay. Can't touch it with my foot. Okay, so we are the last runner in the heavenly stadium, and that I don't know if it's 400 by 4 or 400 by umpteen million, but anyway, we are the last runner, and we are creators of new history. And so then we have the purpose that is required by history, the substantial body of completion, the restoration of human beings, and realization of the kingdom of heaven, restoration of building Chonyuguk, so that we become one with the Messiah, and we become one with God's heart, and we establish Chonyuguk. So that's where we are. Yes, that's where we are. We are living in a very exciting time. Now, we are the womb of fallen human beings. Are the womb of good and evil. Then we have fallen nature and original sin, and so we have to restore that. First, the word that God gave in Genesis 2:17, "Don't eat of the fruit," was broken, and so that was lost. And so we need to restore that word through our faith, faith, and practice. There has to be a central figure. There has to be offering for the condition, and there has to be a time period in order for that to happen. And the foundation for the Messiah, foundation of substance, has to be a person on the good side who exercises dominion over the evil side person. And the evil side person, the first son, must submit to the good side person, the second son. And these are symbolic positions, again, symbolic positions. And one person is not necessarily better than the other or something like that. So, but God does not put us in positions because He loves somebody more or less than somebody else. But these positions are necessary in order for the providence to succeed. In this sense, people who are in a high position should probably especially be very humble. And that's what really impressed me about True Mother. She was so humble, and when she first came and was living in the palace there, I went into her room and I started to bow, right? Of course, go into a room with True Mother, you start to bow. And she stopped me and said, "Don't bow." And I said, "But I want to bow." And what she said, "One reason that Hak Jahan became the way she is because she took too many bows." That's what she said to me. And she, even after that, she would not let me bow to her. "Don't bow, don't bow, don't bow." I'm not such a special person. She is a very, very humble person. And, I really feel that she was trained all that time. She met Father in 1952, right? 1952. So for more than 50 years, Father was training her, sometimes pretty severely if you know her testimony. He was pretty hard on her for many times. He would send her out pioneer witnessing for 40 days, and she would go out with just enough money to take her to her destination, the train ticket to her destination. And then once she got to the destination, it was up to her then to follow the Spirit and follow God's guidance to find a person who would offer her lodging and food and also help her to fulfill her evangelical mission. So she would do this for 40 days and go back out and give a report to Father. And then Father would say, "Okay, so how soon are you going to go back out?" And he did not allow her to rest. He was pushing her so hard. And of course, for 7 years, she did daily lecturing at a park in the middle of Seoul. And in her testimony, she talks about how one day there was a lot of snow on the ground. And so she said to Father, "No one's going to come." But Father, "No, what? You have to go anyway." And because even though physical people may not be there will be spiritual people there who are wanting to hear your lectures. And so she obeyed and went out. And she was tremendously humble. She was assigned as the National Messiah to Russia, and so also she went to Russia and was active there as well. And I know that there are many people in Russia who know and remember her and respect her very much. So she was put in this very high position, the highest of all positions among people who were born into this world with original sin. She is the person who is the exalted to the highest position. And yet, I think she was probably the most humble person that I have ever met. And I think that humility is something that is a model for all of us. Yeah. So, position does not indicate that a person is better than anybody else. So, it's a good idea not to be arrogant if you're in a certain position, because you're not there because you're better than other people. And you're not there because you're not loved by God or somehow you're lacking in some way. So anyway, the foundation so here positions, and the good side person, and good side person, this is a position, okay? Not that someone has more good or less good, but good side person, evil side person, first son submits to good side person and second son, and then meeting the Messiah then, and receiving the Messiah, and removing original sin through the blessing, and having oneness in heart, and attend him, and complete oneself through this attendance. Right? All right, let's start the Adams family after the break, okay? So we'll come back at 3:40. Let's come back at 3:40, and we'll go into Adam's family. That's another big one. Okay.